Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Chris Tarr is going to share some real wisdom with us about the EAS test that just happened yesterday as we recorded the show, about fiber installs at transmitter sites and other places. Chris has been doing a bunch of those, or gotten them done. Great information there. And thinking outside the box to get your translator or STL on a tower that you may not have known about. That's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host here in the Nashville studio of This Week in Radio Tech. And yeah, you can see the TELUS Alliance is a sponsor of the studio, and they're kind enough to give me a couple hours off. Keep growing that. It was an hour off and an hour and a half off. Now it's a couple hours off on Thursday afternoons to bring you This Week in Radio Tech. I'm doing this because I love it. We do have some sponsors that helps pay the bills, pays Chris, pays Suncast, pays me a little bit, and we're just delighted to have you as a viewer or listener to this show. We try to make it interesting. We try to talk about things that would interest a broadcast engineer. And since I do broadcast engineering on the side, I'm part owner of some stations, a lot of times we talk about things that interest me. And I hope that most of the time those things interest you as well. So that's kind of the philosophy of the show. And now the show's philosopher is here. He's in Mukwonago, Wisconsin. It's Chris Tarr. Welcome in, Mr. Philosopher.
Hello there. I'm at the TWiRT North Broadcast Bunker in Mukwonago, Wisconsin, where I sit and philosophize, something like that, all day long. New ways to have fun with TWiRT. Happy to be here. Beautiful day. Life is good. And taking a quick break here it's been a busy week with EAS, and we've got the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association Broadcasters Clinic coming up. So this is kind of crazy time for me, but it's nice to be able to take a few minutes out to do this.
Well, EAS is indeed one of our topics, and oftentimes that's a boring topic, but this time this going to be different. And, I'm a little curmudgeonly on the EAS side, so Chris and I are going to talk about that, but Chris is in a position of knowledge and a little bit of authority, or at least, positive participation in the process of making it better. And I think we had a good test yesterday, the test when people on TikTok and Facebook were saying that, the sky was going to fall and put your cat in the microwave or put your food in the something. Anyway, protect everything, turn your phones off and unplug your vacuum cleaners and all that. Chris was absolutely the voice of reason with our groups on Facebook, where he kind of calmed everybody down, explained what was going on, and did a great job of that. Thank you, Chris. So that's one topic we're talking about. We're going to kind of ease the pain and find out what went right during that, at least what we know for right now. Also, Chris has done a bunch of fiber internet installations this year, and I've gotten a couple of them done, and we're going to compare notes and see, what are the important things to make sure you ask for or don't ask for or insist upon, or how to test if you're getting what you're paying for with the fiber installation. And then we have some outside of the box thinking. This is so critical for us as engineers to not just go for the obvious, but when we're faced with a challenge, and in this case, Chris is going to have some stories about building translator sites and thinking outside the box in getting those things cited. A site for your translator, and maybe we'll have some other information about that as well. So I'm looking forward to these conversations. Really important to think outside the box. So Chris, if you're ready, we're going to hear from Nautel, and then we're going to be right back. Nautel is one of the sponsors of today's show, and of course, Nautel keeps supporting our broadcast industry and engineers like you and me by doing these Transmission Talk Tuesday roundtable discussions. And coming up, October 17th. Is the next one. That is not next Tuesday, but the next one. But you can go ahead and register. Go to this website, nautel.com BradCast.com/webinars, and then click on Transmission Talk Tuesday, and you'll get to the page you see on the screen right now. It tells you a little bit about the next 2 Transmission Talk Tuesdays that are coming up. Transmission Site Considerations, Part 1 and Part 2. There's a lot of transmission site considerations, and you'll want to do that. Go register there. Easy peasy to do, especially if you've done it once before. Oh, the topic of the first one is antennas, lines, combiners, and inspections of those things, what to look for. And then topic number 2 on October 31st is going to be air handling and cooling. I always liked that topic. I've always found it to be fascinating. In fact, that was the topic of the very first industry article that I wrote in Broadcast Engineering Magazine, about 100 years ago. And I received not exactly accolades, but I got a lot of positive comments on this article, even though I'm not, professionally trained in air handling. This has always been a fascinating topic for me. And in fact, it was an Autel transmitter that was featured as one of the pictures of one of the sites that I wrote the article about. So thanks a lot, Nautel. Nautel.com/webinars to register for Transmission Talk Tuesday, 2 of them this month. It is not a waste of your time. It's a very good use of your time. Isn't that right, Chris Tarr?
That is absolutely right, Kirk.
I do love to participate. You've been an expert guest on a couple of those, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I don't know if I'd say expert, but I've been a guest on them.
Okay. All right. Let's move right into EAS, the Emergency Alert System. So many pundits on TV and radio yesterday were talking about it. And of course, they refer to as things like the EBS test or the alien test or the mind control test. And I don't know why this one got so much crazy social media coverage. Like, seriously, my wife showed me a video, and I don't know if where it was from TikTok or where. It was obviously somebody just spouting junk. And they said, go outside at 2:00, turn off your phones, hide your phones under some, in a Faraday bag or something, under your mattress or whatever. And there's going to be lights in the sky, explosions in the sky. Things are going to happen. It's going to be really bad. And I thought, this is crazy. And my wife was asking me, is this true? I said, no, this is not true at all. There's no mind control virus and there's no explosions in the sky. Of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, gosh, I hope there's not. What if I'm the one misinformed? but no, it's a test, and they do this. And I don't think there's any nefarious motivations behind these tests. I'm not convinced that I think we absolutely need them, but Chris, maybe you can persuade me otherwise. And this test, I listened to it on several of my radio stations by streaming, because we put our EAS on our streams, and the audio quality was like refreshingly good. So Chris, let me turn it over to you, and you to tell us what this thing was all about and how it went.
Sure. Well, first of all, that's why we have tests. How do you think the audio got improved? Because the audio was horrible in the first couple of tests. And so we knew that there needed to be a change made. It's funny you mentioned, the tinfoil hats. It happens every year. A few years ago it was, President Trump's going to take over the radio stations and cell phones. And, every year there's always some conspiracy theory, but obviously, as we've known, that's pretty just, a lot of just noise, not a lot of truth there. My involvement with EAS goes back a long, long time. As of this year, I am the chairman of the SECC, which is the State Emergency Communications Committee. We are sanctioned by the FCC. I was appointed to the board and then voted in as director when Gary Tim retired. Gary was just an amazing guy. With EAS, one of the grandfathers of it, and worked very hard to kind of create state EAS programs that we have today. He was very instrumental in that, and he and I have known each other for a long, long time, and he wore me down. I think the first time or two he asked if I would take it over, I said no because I knew better. But then he finally said, "Come on, we need you." So here I am, and basically what my role is I'm the liaison in Wisconsin between the broadcasters and the FCC and FEMA. So, I also, the committee manages the state EAS plan, but I'm kind of, I kind of take that and help move that process along. One of the things, and some of this, if you're coming to the WBA, you'll hear me. I'm doing an entire talk on this stuff. So some of this will sound familiar if you're coming to the Broadcasters Clinic. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know, and this is something that is in every state, is that the FCC has designated these SECCs, these committees, to be the ones to write the state EAS rules. So while there are some federal rules that determine, that you have to have the equipment and what the equipment can do, what you need to forward and what stations you monitor and waiver processes and everything else, that's dictated by the state committee. And you are supposed to, by FCC rule, follow the procedures outlined in the state EAS plan, which is now we're required to file those every year with the FCC. So the FCC has a copy of your state plan. Yeah.
Okay. So I got a basic question, Chris, and I've never understood why this is. Why do we have state by state plans? And my first guess would just be that that maybe the federal government thought that this ought to be done state by state because state associations or committees would be closer to the needs and layout of a particular state. Because covering Nevada or Idaho is a lot different than covering Delaware. So why does every state have a committee?
That is exactly right. And I think that is actually a good example of where the government knew where to step back. Each state is different. And for example, we're not going to have a tsunami warning here. So why would we have in the plan that you need to forward those or you need to monitor for those or anything else? So, but we do have a nuclear power plant. And there's also the amount of stakeholders involved in EAS these days is massive. In just a state alone, you've got individual municipalities, you've got county level, you've got state level. So to try to juggle all of that with just the staff at FCC and FEMA would be very difficult. So the SECC committee is made up of those stakeholders: radio, wireless, cable, emergency management. We have a representative of each one of those on the committee. So when we determine these procedures and these rules, we get input from all of those different areas together, and we meet at least once a year and we have these discussions. So I think that's a very good thing that we have that, because it's not a one size fits all thing. And if you have a state like Wisconsin is a great example of a state that's very active in EAS and emergency planning, you get some really good results. There are a lot of other states that really don't, that really don't do a lot of this kind of work, and it's kind of just figure it out. But Wisconsin is actually pretty well known for its emergency communications. We all can sign up for state issued IDs that get us through closed sections in emergencies, closed areas to get to our transmitter sites and things. We actually have, it's a card issued in the state format that is instantly recognizable by emergency personnel and law enforcement personnel. So they can immediately look. It looks just like their cards. It has the same format, has our picture on it, and it allows us to get to our transmitter sites for whatever we need to do. So we've always really been ahead of the curve. But at any rate, that's kind of the background of what I do and what my involvement is. So I was very active yesterday, obviously, with this national test. And one of the things that's coming up is, and we've all heard about it, are the new EAS rules and the new firmware updates. And those updates and rule changes are actually reflected in how well this past test worked, because it was kind of a beta test for, how tests will probably be done going forward. And the difference this time around is this was sent only with an iPause message, or the cap message over iPause, so the internet delivery, which will either be text to speech or a recorded file. In this case, it was text to speech. And the message was sent out first on cap, so it got mostly to the EAS receivers before the rebroadcast from other stations got first. So what you were hearing is, in most cases, a first generation message over the air. At worst, maybe a second generation, but a second generation of a clean message to begin with, versus the original tests where it was a spoken message sent out on a PEP, then got relayed down the line over and over and rebroadcast. This was really a direct message to each individual encoder using a cap formatted message over iPause.
No.
They also, if you notice, the text in the message was a lot more plain language than it used to be. A national test of the emergency alert system, no action needed. Those are some changes that are coming up in this new rule as well. And what the new rule is to kind of follow that. So in the past, you monitor 2 or 3 stations and you monitor cap or iPause. I always get those confused. Cap is the message, iPause is the system. But you monitor all those things and you just play whatever comes first, whether or not it was the best quality or the most informative. The iPause messages are only going to start carrying more and more information for TV. It can have web links. It's a much richer format. And obviously with text to speech, it can also be much clearer spoken word. So in the past, you just get whatever you got first, and that would just automatically forward. What the new firmware is going to do is delay all of the other messages to prioritize cap. So when an alert comes down, if you get something that should be coming in on cap, the encoder will actually delay sending that message for at least 10 seconds to wait to see if the cap message comes in. If the cap message comes in during that window, that's what it will proceed to send. Now, if you really want to make sure, you can actually, 10 seconds is the minimum delay, but it can go, you can set it as far out as you want to try and prioritize that cap message first, because that's always going to be that first gen message in clear language, plain language.
I learned something yesterday, and that people were saying, well, how come I ended up playing the over the air message before the cap message? I didn't get the cap message until 25 seconds later or 45 seconds later. And the one reason I heard was that, well, your EAS box is not constantly polling the cap server. It does so every, on some scheduled basis, which maybe you can change. But so if you happen to poll it and there wasn't a message there, then it'll be at least the next polling time before there would be a message there. All right.
Yeah, and the polling time is several times a minute, so it's never more than usually 30 seconds or so before it polls successfully. But you also got to remember it's on your internet speed. All of these sorts of things play into that. And in the stations that I take care of, in every case, I think except for one, the cap message came first, and it was within probably 5 or 6 seconds that the others came in. So it was pretty quick coming out. But again, these are all the results of these previous tests. Where if you remember the message was the first test with double and triple audio, and stuff was just garbled and you couldn't understand it. And then the feedback from the listeners and the consumers saying, I don't know what any of this means. One of the big changes with this next rule update coming up in December is using more plain language things. We're no longer going to use the phrase a primary entry station or primary entry point has, created this alert. It will say, FEMA, or it will say, whatever, and using a lot more plain language. There is, no action is needed, those sorts of things, because, we used kind of inside baseball on these for our own use. And it turns out, surprise, surprise, that most people have no idea what we're talking about. So, but again, those are all results. And somebody yesterday said, well, I don't get why we do this, and this is stupid, and, nobody ever listens, and we do all this paperwork. But the reality is that's why we do it. Like ETRS Form 3 is a great example. They'll go back and look, well, how long did it take for the cap message to get to where it was going, and did it get there before another one, and by how much, and all of that stuff gets analyzed to make these tweaks, like with this firmware change for encoders. because you look at those results and you can say, okay, here's where we need to do a better job of making this work. So that's kind of the lead up to where we're at now. And then yesterday I was on the phone. It was actually really kind of cool listening. I listened to the open line with FEMA and the FCC as they were sending these tests. And that was really interesting. It's just like listening to a launch. I mean, there's really a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
But then the state SECC chair people, we all got on a call at 4:00 with the FCC, and we discussed what happened and how it worked and everything else. And I can say that it was a very successful test. There were no major reports. I think in American Samoa, they didn't get the cell phone alerts. That was one thing I caught. But other than that, there were some one-off things, some stations that didn't catch it, but nothing widespread. It seems like everybody was pretty well writing this off as a pretty successful test. And, something else yesterday that I was reading where people like, well, it's all stored on the computer. Why do we have to do it over the air? You can see that we sent it. We can see that we received it. But this is why you really need to have a human there to kind of hear the actual end result. The fact that you got the test doesn't mean that the test worked, until you send the test and you can hear with your own ears, yep, I heard the test. And then, there's Form 3 that some people are talking about that's kind of a pain to fill out. That's why we do that Form 3, because we have to list what times did we receive the tests and from who. Well, now we can see what are the weak spots in the delivery system. So these are all, yesterday's test worked really well, and people are going, well, we see it works. Well, the reason it works is because we do the test. It's kind of like, we don't know what we do till we don't do it anymore.
And we've had some disappointing tests in the past, and so I'm delighted that things were a lot better this time. We're talking to Chris Tarr, not only about EAS. We have a couple other topics coming up, including fiber internet installations. I've got a couple more questions for Chris after our break, and one thing I'm going to ask Chris, and maybe he can come up with an answer while we're taking the break, and that is, Chris, you've mentioned a couple times, and don't answer now, but I want to ask about this text to speech, if that occurs in a station's own box, or if that occurred at the origination point. In other words, it wasn't a real human being speaking into a microphone with that. Did that text to speech originate somewhere else? So I'd like to understand that, because the reason I asked that is because, with local officials, with local EMA, emergency management officials, wanting to maybe get on your station and warn you about something like a chemical spill or an explosion or something like that. None of them are trained broadcasters. That they may just be terrible on a microphone or mic shy. It'd be nice if they could type into a program, some nice text and have that read nicely by a text to speech. That would be a great use of text to speech, as long as it doesn't sound like, drunken Paul from the National Weather Service. So anyway, Chris will give us some insight into that coming up this week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. Chris Tarr is here, and we're talking about EAS and some more stuff coming up. Our show is brought to you by, in part, Virtual Rack from Broadcast Bionics. What is Virtual Rack? Well, you've heard me talking for a couple of years now about containerized broadcast infrastructure. So audio consoles, phone systems, intercom systems, now audio processing. Pretty soon, I think you're going to see things like profanity delays. And it's not just my employer, TELUS Alliance. They've been, really pushing the boundaries on this, but other manufacturers have as well, like Sound 4 and 2WCOM. They've got products also that are containerized. Well, Broadcast Bionics is doing this, making this job a little easier, because containerized software ain't exactly the easiest thing to install. Not at all. Sure, you may be able to run a script and install a container, but what about the networking that needs to go on inside the host computer? That can actually get a little bit complicated. What about affinity CPU pinning, or having a CPU core assigned to a particular container? Well, that's the kind of thing that Broadcast Bionics has made really easy. Suncast, I don't know if you can bring that web page up. There it is. Yeah. broadcast hardware that isn't hard. You can rapidly deploy containerized broadcast products with Virtual Rack from Broadcast Bionics. And they include, it's kind of like an app store. They include links to all the known broadcast infrastructure products that run on containers, or at least ones that they've had agreements with. So Telos Alliance, Sound 4, and also 2WCOM. And you basically pick out the broadcast functionalities that you want. Say, hey, I want 2 audio consoles and a phone system and an audio processor. Well, you just click on those. They will install right before your very eyes, typically in under a minute. And now those containers are installed. The IP addresses are assigned and taken care of. And then you're given the opportunity to go license those products with their respective manufacturers. Now, many of these software products at least have some functionality without being licensed. I know that some of our products from Telos Alliance do, for example, not really usable on the air, but you can play with them and make sure make sure this is what you want to do. And then you contact that manufacturer, get the licensing done, enter the licensing keys in there, and voila, you're good to go. You've got broadcast functionality. As shown on the screen here, you can deploy your products, your broadcast functionalities with a Virtual Rack. You can set up failover systems with them as well. You can get a couple of these virtual racks and set them up in a failover mode. It's really interesting and easy stuff you can do. Dan McQuillan, the head of Broadcast Bionics, was on our show a couple of months ago and made this very clear, gave some demos as to how this stuff works. 2 different sizes of the Virtual Rack product, a smaller one that will handle, you can install a smaller number of different broadcast functions, and a larger one that you can install quite a few more. Go to this website and check this thing out at bionics.co.uk or bionic.radio for Broadcast Bionics, or just Google Bionics Virtual Rack and it'll take you there. You ought to check this thing out. It makes life easy. And I've installed now, one of my radio stations is operating 24/7 on some virtualized broadcast software. We've got an audio console, the Axia Altus, and we've got a VXS phone system. Now, I put those on my own server, but it certainly took help from our support guys to get that done. It's not exactly child's play, although, now that it's installed, it's working great. Virtual Rack makes that all easy. So check it out from Broadcast Bionics. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Chris Tarr is our guest and co-host. I guess he gets paid twice today, right? Oh, no,
so
guest
nothing is nothing.
Guest work for free.
There you go.
All right. So do you have any answers to my questions about where the text-to-speech takes place?
Yes and no. In yesterday's case, I'm not quite sure. However, the text-to-speech, if there's true text-to-speech that happens locally, I think in this case they sent an audio file. It was still text-to-speech.
Which they can do. They can pre-produce an audio file.
Right. And that's kind of what one of the tests that they want to run, because that's going to be the future of this, is sending payload data like audio files rather than spoken voice. Rather than relaying, because that's how the spoken voice did, is it got relayed. They'd say it once live somewhere to something, and then it would start to daisy chain down. Instead, they just record it once and distribute it through iPods, and the message is clean and first generation.
Wait a minute. You mean FEMA can take over my radio station, send me files like FEMA radio, all emergencies all the time? No? That's not how that works.
I mean, I guess they could. I don't know why they would, and I think they'd get into trouble.
They might. Not a proper function of FEMA.
Right. I think somebody'd be getting fired over that.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, and then, to answer your other question about local emergencies and things, that is something that, again, that will kind of depend on the local, the local emergency communications committee to determine the state EAS plan. Will that happen over an audio file, or will that happen over just through a primary entry point and then relayed? In our case, we relay them just because we're not really at that point yet with everybody being comfortable enough to record an audio file and send it out. They're starting to work on it. So, I've been talking to DOJ about that, and slowly getting there. But I do know that in the past we've worked with all of those people in terms of making sure their audio quality is really really good, how to hold the mic, where to put it. So those things are actually entered into the discussion because again, we run Amber Alerts and things like that. So we do get a taste of what it sounds like when these alerts happen. And in our case, after these alerts, there is a meeting afterwards with everybody involved, Department of Justice, broadcasters, and that sort of thing, where we go over things like, how did it sound? Was it audible? Did it, that kind of thing. So, the future is going to be audio file delivery. It's going to have to be, just based on, where things are going. But I guess, long story short is, text to speech is kind of the preferred method, unless you live in Wisconsin, and you've got all these weird sounding towns that people can't ever pronounce. Try spelling McGuanago, or saying McGuanago after reading it, or Oconomowoc, or Waukesha,
or Samoan names. Oh my gosh, Samoan
right,
names.
exactly.
Where our station manager Joey used to live was Fongongongo.
There you go. So there are some situations where that doesn't work as well. But they really are pushing, this rule change and this firmware update. It's really pushing the features of iPause now that we've got it working and it seems to not have many issues with going down or anything like that. Is that ability to push audio files, web links, much more information for video providers as well. So that's where that's heading, and that's again why the audio sounded so good and why we're so pleased with the results. Is that really tells us that we're all on the right track with that.
Is each state supposed to have a CAP server, or is there just one, or are there several regional? How's that work?
The CAP servers are. It's interesting. There are a couple of providers that are contracted by the government, and then the people who are allowed to access those to send messages have to be certified, and everything is and get a security certificate that will talk to this CAP server. So it's all very secure and can be revoked or removed at any time for misuse. So
sure.
And the software that they use is also very, I don't want to say very, because there's always going to be a smarter dummy, but pretty dummy proof. I mean, it's really hard to mess up an alert because we are dealing with non-techie, non-radio people with these systems. We have, in our state, we already now have local governments doing EAS tests and things. So it's set up in a way where, there's very little they can do that isn't going to be an issue. And when there is, that's again where, we step in and talk to these local governments. We had one that was issuing, I want to say a required monthly test every week, which is tripping everybody. A local government went, you can't do that, and fix that so that they couldn't. So there are situations like that as well.
Are there times that a broadcaster at their own station should initiate their own alert?
Never. They should never do that. Local stations.
An LP1?
An LP test. Yeah, I mean, an LP1 and an LP2 generally wouldn't even originate a test. They would usually just relay from, really, there's the primary entry point, the major, the major ones like the governments and those sort of things that will initiate a test, usually through the iPause system. LP1s and LP2s really shouldn't be originating anything. Generally, they just relay something else that's been originated, because those institutions aren't the ones handling the emergencies. So basically, when an emergency is issued, it's issued by the authority that issues those things. Like Amber Alerts are Department of Justice, weather alerts or Weather Service, government stuff's FEMA. So each person has that. But somebody had asked me about that they couldn't figure out how to originate a test. It's like, if it's any or originate an alert, I said, well, if it's anything other than a required weekly test, don't do it.
Okay. Speaking of weather alerts, am I correct or incorrect? Is the National Weather Service yet tied in with CAP?
They are not. Their system is similar, but it's not the same. They're strictly over the air, but they use the same kind of squawks and everything, and
right. Yeah.
Those.
But the best quality you're going to get is whatever came out of the NOAA transmitter, and some of those transmitters are tied with god awful phone lines back to the weather office. I mean, we got one here in Nashville that sometimes lately it's been okay, but I mean, I feed the internet with NOAA weather radio from Nashville, so I listen to it, frequently. And there's been times when it's been like, hum and buzz, and you can almost hear the audio over it.
Well, keep in mind, first of all, you're not required to carry those. So if you really do, if that really is a problem, you may want to reconsider that. And that's kind of why, because it's a whole different system. There's nothing tied in. Now, in our case with the Weather Service, and let me back up. Obviously, that concerns them because you're picking it up over their system, which is supposed to be alerting people. So if there really is that bad of an audio problem, hopefully they're going to want to fix it. In the case of our state, the Weather Service maintenance is contracted out to Wisconsin Public Radio, which really the university. And so their broadcast engineers take care of that. So it always sounds really good. I find that usually a phone call to fix that is really all it takes to do that. But again, it's also your choice if you want to run those or not.
Yeah. Although if there's a tornado warning and your station is unattended, you do want to run that.
Right. And generally your LP1 or LP2 will run those. So you'll get them either way.
I suppose so. My station's in Cleveland, Mississippi. We're a long distance from either of two NOAA transmitter sites, and it's challenging. We've got had good outdoor antennas up, but one of them, which is at Parchman State Penitentiary. I don't want to go fix that one. No, it typically I haven't listened to it lately, but in the past, it just has sounded like hammered dog vomit. It was just awful.
There are times I had one site where I got a better reception somewhere else, and I actually just streamed it into the building from somewhere else to get a better signal. But yeah, it's tough because you're working with a lot of different partners to make these things work.
It would be nice, and when I asked a few years ago about this, the answer was, well, there's no money allocated for that. But it would be nice if your National Weather Service office could offer a stream that you could, reliably pick up using something like FUBAR 2000 or something on a PC, or even a dedicated box. I'm sure Innovonics or others would be happy to make a box that would pick up a stream from the National Weather Service that would be a higher quality audio stream, and you could use that as well as the over-the-air as a backup. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be, but I can absolutely see where there'd be no budget for that. I mean, they're already stretched thin as it is, I'm sure. So to say, hey, and by the way, we want you to set up a server that's going to feed all of these streams, probably is outside of the realm of what they can do. But I agree, it would be nice to get a nice feed from somewhere. And who knows, with technology changing, that that may be something in the works, or or tied into something else.
Yeah. Well, at least there'd be no ASCAP, BMI, or SECC fees.
Right. All weather, all the time.
That's right. Okay. Are we finished with EAS? Good discussion. Thank you.
We certainly can be. Yes.
Okay. Fiber. You've said, Chris, that you've been involved with several fiber installs this year. I've had a couple of new fiber installs at my stations. But I'd like to talk about that. Fiber becoming more and more available for my own radio stations in Mississippi. And you think of Mississippi as being a technology backwater, and in many ways it often is. But we've been trying to see can we get better internet at our studio location in say Cleveland, Mississippi for years. And we ended up getting fiber. It was offered to us in Greenville, Mississippi, at a studio there by a company called C Spire. C Spire has been like an alternative cell carrier, but they also they got fiber like in a ring all around the state of Mississippi that they provide backbone fiber services to governments and schools and businesses and cell sites, and particularly their own cell sites, right? So we asked, can we get it in Cleveland? And they said, well, we're going to open up retail operations for that soon. Well, guess what? When they started installing it, I said, Wait, you're just hooking onto some fiber that's here running along US Highway 61 in our front yard. Has this fiber been here a while? Oh, yeah, it's been here 15 years. You mean it's been here 15 years and I haven't been able to buy it? I've had to put up with suck and stink for 15 years? And they said, well, sorry, but yeah, it's available now. So apparently, I realized business plans change, or, I guess their infrastructure, was that they finished with that in plan. And now they want to sell at retail to businesses and homes where it's convenient to do so. So finally, we got fiber hooking into fiber that's been there for 15 years. Chris, do you find anything like that? Or maybe you should just tell me your own stories about getting fiber at sites that it previously wasn't available at.
Well, you do see that a lot. And some of it is that, like C Spire may not have owned the fiber at that time. There's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions and things in the fiber market where all of a sudden what one company couldn't provide before, they can provide now, or, they have rights to light on that fiber, or there's dark fiber that they bought. So, there could have been any number of reasons why, you couldn't do it then, but can do it now. The other thing, we're seeing a lot of growth because of the Rural Broadband Fund, and there's a lot of build out going on there. And the decision was just, in a lot of those cases, just like fiber. I'm seeing it all over the place, actually, near me, because I live in outside of Milwaukee. You get a little bit out of town here, and, I live with the cows. So, there's a lot of that going on right now. I see on my way to my Fort Atkinson office, literally middle of nowhere, they're running fiber. So I think more and more you're seeing that because of the money that they're getting for infrastructure to build it. There was my Portage facility this year. For years, we tried to get fiber, and finally we got it this year. And they had run the fiber that far out of town. And I know we've mentioned this before, but Kristen Roberts at IQ Wired is who I use a lot to find fiber, and she's really good at being able to find, if there's somebody who can provide fiber, she'll find it. But even now, I've been able to find some providers pretty easily on my own without a lot of help. I just got one, getting a deal set up for Portage through a local provider there, where I'm getting 500 meg symmetrical for $130 a month. I mean, it's insane. And that's the other thing you'll find with fiber is the prices are all over the place.
Oh, they are. Yeah.
I've got 100 meg symmetrical in Fort Atkinson, and that's almost $500 a month. And, I've got a local provider in Madison, and that's, $100 a month for 300. So, it varies widely, but
I want to talk about that for a second, because it's nice to compare with other people. Maybe it puts you in a better negotiating position. But my business partner in the radio station is Larry Fuss in Las Vegas. He's got a gig up and down for $79 a month. Here at my house, I've got AT&T fiber, supposed to be a gig up and down. It kind of almost is if the wind's right. And it's flat $100 a month. That includes taxes. And they said that's, as far as I knew, for everything going to be the price. We'll see. But at our radio stations from C Spire in Mississippi, the service has been great, but by golly, it's $350 and $400 a month. And at a transmitter site, it's that much. And we're not even getting a gig. We're typically getting we're buying about 250 megs symmetrical. It's extremely reliable, so it's way better than the cable service ever was at those locations. But my goodness, though, you're right. The prices vary enormously. You think it's due to a lack of competition? I mean, if you're the fiber provider somewhere, you're probably the only fiber choice that a person has.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's competition. Are you leasing, reselling service? I know AT&T out here does that a lot, where they have resellers that are virtual fiber operators, like virtual mobile networks, that basically use their IP over AT&T's network. They just lease the lines. So I think that's where a lot of that comes into. And it's also the type of infrastructure. Generally, you're going to pay more for tier one companies that have, manage a lot of their own country, nationwide backbone and infrastructure versus, the two places I was talking about where I got really inexpensive internet were both local companies that, while they had their own local infrastructure, didn't have it nationwide for peering and everything else. So, they're not having to maintain a national network. On the same token, if you're not on their network and there's a problem, you're cut off from everybody else. So those are some of the things. But, when you're going to buy fiber, one of the things there's a few things I always try to look for. Number one is, you can pretty much tell right away in an area if you're going to be able to get fiber. You can look at the vault. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can get serviced. For example, I do have a site where I know there's a fiber vault sitting right there. It's at a cell site, but best I can do is DSL. So, that doesn't always mean that. But if you can see the vault, generally you can get service. I'll add to that because agreed. Friends of mine run WEVL community station in Memphis, and they're at a cell site. And I know there's fiber running to the cell site. It's a good, solid, big cell site. And the only thing they can get for internet that anybody will sell them is from Comcast, Xfinity. And they've had some super infrastructure, but it's been completely off for a grand total of 8 days in the last six months. Which is, for business level service that is in the range of $400 a month. That's ridiculous. But they can't get the fiber that's right next door. And I guess they're not a wholesale customer. I was going to say, some of that is, for example, in this particular site, the fiber belongs to AT&T, but they don't sell there. So that's their own private fiber. So, that was a different situation. But there's a couple of things I try to do because I've mentioned this before on the show. I'm in the process of converting most of my buildings and sites to IP and IP STLs. So we're kind of slowly getting rid of RF STLs. But that, as you can imagine, that brings on its own level of potential problems. So, one of the things you want to look for is try to get fiber from the same company on all your ends, because that way that IP stays on their own network. It doesn't go through any peers. So if you've got Comcast or whatever in this city and Comcast in this other city, there's a good chance that the entire time that traffic rides on their network and doesn't go through any peering points where things get congested or can fail. The other thing I recommend is setting up VPN tunnels, because that way the data itself isn't packetized for the STL stuff. It sets up the path through packets, but once that tunnel's established, the audio just travels over that route without thinking about being broken up or anything else. So, those are a couple things that, I definitely recommend. But keep in mind that speed isn't everything. You don't need to get 500 meg fiber at a site. You don't, if you're running uncompressed audio, it's 1.5 meg.
Right. Exactly.
You really don't, my coworker still, he's finally getting to it, but I'll say, we're going to get, 20 meg fiber or whatever. Well, do you think we should do 50? No, we're not going to use it ever. So, when shopping, always, think about that. It's, you've got latency, which is a big one, who the provider is. Speed is almost secondary, because again, with audio, now the only situations where I look at that a little bit differently is if it's a studio site where you're also doing office traffic. Then obviously you're going to want a little bit faster, and you're not going to want to have something that's going to congest the STL audio coming out of the building. So, that's a situation where, you want to be a little bit more careful. But, fiber is, especially because of this rural broadband fund, I've gotten fiber in places that I really was just floored that I could get it. I was, one of the situations where, I'd go, well, I'll give it a shot. I'm not going to get anything. And all of a sudden it comes back and I've got like 4 options. Just floored.
You mentioned Kristen Roberts. Also mentioned another friend, Dan Merwin. Both of these people are involved in the business of getting people internet where maybe you thought you couldn't, and telephony services as well. We'll put links to both of them in the show notes. Hey, Chris, we're going to take a quick break. In fact, you're part of the break, Chris. Angry Audio is a company that is owned and run by great personal friend of mine. He used to be my boss. Now I'm his customer. And he's an advertiser here on our show, and that's Angry Audio and Mike Dosh. Chris, what would you like to tell us about Angry Audio today?
Oh, how much I love them. It's interesting. There are a few companies left that make these kind of just boutique, Broadcast Tools is one, Henry Engineering is another, that really get together and make devices by radio people for radio people. And what Catfish has done with Angry Audio is looked at the pain points that we have and have come up with creative, solid ways to fix those pain points. Preprocessors. We've got, AFEX compellers no longer exist. Transatlantic Arianes no longer exist. There are no more really good AGCs for preprocessing. They stepped up and created one, brought in Corny, did a fantastic job with the Chameleon series audio processors. Studio signal lights. There was something that, everybody wanted, but, the really nice ones, as Catfish will even admit, he's like, hey, you know what? The brushed aluminum ones, boy, they sure are nice. And if you can afford them, get them. But these are a lot less expensive because they're just ABS plastic. So again, it's solving that, a lot of people would love to have those studio signal lights, couldn't afford them. Here's an affordable set. So there you go. The Rave video mixing console. Again, there's a lot of consoles out there at that price point, but none of them actually operate like real broadcast consoles. So there they go. They created this Rave mixing console with the mix minuses and the on-air lights and all of these other things that you're going to want to need or need in a small console. USB audio gizmo is another fact. This is one we were just talking about. I was talking about the other day where I had a client who had a computer with a sound card in it and just used the little, mini jack to plug into their board. And they started to hear literally interference from the CPU, this whining. Yeah. The audio wasn't really isolated. While the USB gizmo plugs into the back of the computer, gives you line outs and eliminates that issue. Again, not something that, is something you can think of, but something that's really easy to order and grab. The mic disconnectors, studio hub connectors, button gizmos, you name it. I mean, there's just solutions for everyday issues that we run into. And none of us have the time anymore to MacGyver these solutions, to build these transformers and to build these switches and boxes. So Angry Audio does it for you. And then you just have to come up with a list of what's causing you pain. Well, here you go. That's what we're going to get. So,
Angry Audio, they got solutions for stuff you didn't know was a problem.
They do. Trust me, if you're going to come over, they probably have something to help you. So, get angry. When problems problems crop up in your studio, get angry. AngryAudio.com.
Don't get mad. Get angry.
Get angry.
And so I know we have some station owners, managers watching our show as well from time to time. Some of you do your own engineering. Some of you say, I wish I could hire that Chris Tarr guy because he sure knows what he's doing. Well, you probably can't. But here's what you can do. Max Connect now offers engineering services in a good part of the U.S., not across the entire country yet. If you live in West Undershirt, Colorado, they may not be able to get to you. But Max Connect, the same people that started out with what Max Connect Wireless, they're now offering engineering services and tower services. And they also are, like Angry Audio, they're also making some very interesting products. In fact, the secret is Angry Audio actually makes the product that I'm going to show you on the screen right now. The Max Connect U192 MPX USB sound card. There are a number of FM audio processors that are available in software there's one coming out later on that can run as a Docker container, but there are others that run in Windows, for example. And for example, the Omnia 9 stereo tool, the Leif Claesson's Breakaway and Omnia SST, all those can run on a computer. But one of the problems is getting high quality MPX signal. That's the multiplex. That's usually on a BNC connector, getting that out of the computer. Well, here's your solution right here. Max Connect Broadcast U192 MPX USB sound card. That's a mouthful, but this thing really rocks. This was designed, at least in large part, by Mike Dosh over at Angry Audio, but it's branded with Max Connect. They are the exclusive dealer. It's their product. And they warranty it and they provide service for it. And it's just amazing. Great great audio, no tilting, no ringing, no problems that other sound cards that really aren't built for this task can give you. And there are only a few on the market. This is the cat's meow. This is what will actually make your PC's FM audio processor running on your PC into a real FM a processor with a proper output. And this is just an amazing. Check this thing out at maxconnect.com and contact Max Connect for lots of other things too, like their Max Connect Wireless, which has prioritized high-speed internet data over wireless, over 4G, and then also their engineering services. They will come and set you straight, set you right, make your transmitter happy.
It's funny. I was talking to Catfish about that sound card, and he's like, "Man, I wish I would have come up with that idea." he's like, "Yeah, they came to me about that, and I was happy to partner with them. But man, that's a great idea. I wish I would have come up with first."
It is well designed. All right, we have a final segment here, and then one more commercial. The segment, well, I'll tell you what, we kind of didn't get finished talking about fiber. Chris, when you're ordering fiber or having it installed, have you run across any issues, problems, things that, next time I order fiber, I'm going to make sure and specify this or that? You kind of said speed wasn't probably the most important thing for most broadcasters. If you're uploading video files, okay, maybe it is. Maybe your time's valuable. But if you're carrying ordinary business traffic and even some audio, especially coded audio, speed, you don't need a gig. 100 meg, that is freaking reliable up and down. That may be plenty for you. So what else might you add to that in your installations?
Of course, keeping in mind that in most cases, upload is going to be more important than download, especially in the office building where you're sending out audio. And that's why a lot of times asymmetrical data is what we use. And then we don't think about that. If we've got 300 down and 10 up, well, you're going to have problems if you're going to start trying to use that as an STL. So, there's that sort of thing. The other thing that I think, people don't think about that I've learned is think about where the equipment is going to get installed and make as clear a path or as clear a plan as possible from where the pedestal is into your building, because there's going to have a lot of questions and they have a lot of contractors to come out and do various pieces of this project. So this last time, I record time, I did a speed run with a fiber install and got it done. But I basically had the original installer out there and said, here's where our cabinet is. Where's your fiber? Where's the underground, the vault? And he showed me. And so I had my electrical tractor come out, run a conduit, have everything set for them, drilled the hole in the side. So now they just have to come back and run their fiber over from their vault and into my cabinet. They don't have to drill, they don't have to trench, they don't have to do anything. So, I'm going to have this fiber in less than a month, which is in the world of fiber pretty quick. So, same thing with a different site where I said, okay, here's where you're going to drill your hole. Here's where your fiber's going to come in. Here's where the equipment's going to be in the rack. So, I find that a lot of times where you get hung up is in things that you're not planning for them, because there's a whole lot of ways they can do it, but there are only a few that are going to really work well. I had one that got hung up just on permitting with the state. So we didn't realize, or we didn't think about the fact that we were on our building is surrounded by wetland. So they really had a hard time figuring out how to trench with that. So we worked with them to kind of work around that and get a path that wasn't going to encroach on the wetlands or anything. So, be involved and think like an installer. If you don't want an installer drilling an unsightly hole somewhere, figure out where it's going to go and let them know that.
That's a great point. We had an install done at a new transmitter site in Oxford, Mississippi, and when C Spire came in the building, they ended up cable tying an Ethernet cable from their ONT over to some other piece of gear that was theirs, I guess some kind of router before it became our signal, and they ended up cable tying it to a cable ladder that went up the side of the wall inside this prefab building. And that's really not where I wanted it, but and I thought, well, let me just snip their cable ties and reroute that. Oh, the cable's to length. I have no options unless until I run my own cable. So on some future trip, I'm going to just run my own cable. It's just Ethernet, but
right.
Run my own.
And in that case, probably all you needed to do is say, hey, can you just leave me enough? I don't need you to cable tie it, but can you run that up and leave enough length so I can dress it? And I've done that too, where I don't want them. Yeah. I don't want them messing with my stuff. So I'll go, hey, it's going to go in this rack, but just leave me enough, and I'll make sure it gets run in there. And they actually like that because it's just less work for them.
Oh, sure. Of course. I think I was either out taking a Winky or getting a donut run or something like that. I wasn't in the building when he finished up. So my fault. I should have, I should have been there. So. All right. Hey, coming up, we have one little final segment, a short segment about thinking outside the box. We're going to go ahead and take our final break right now. Let me tell you, we're going to show you a little video about Vox Pro. You may have seen this before, you may not have, but pay attention, because your disc jockeys, your morning talent, whether you're a talk station or a party station, you take phone calls, or even if you take interviews, Vox Pro is a really cool thing to have, and your jocks will love it. Some even insist on it. We'll be right back.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's Vox Pro. Lots of different audio software out there. Why Vox Pro? It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in Vox Pro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here. Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready. 5, ready for that secret sound. Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit. You are tackling secret sound, caller 9. I'm ready, St. John. One of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Final thing that I love about Vox Pro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. Vox Pro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about Vox Pro, and you will be glad you did.
And the place to get Vox Pro is from Broadcasters General Store. They will walk you through the process and get you on order and get you the best sharp pencil price, too. Broadcasters General Store is at bgs.cc. That's the website you're looking at right now on your screen if you're watching our show. Or you can call them at 352-622-7700. 352-622-7700. Love the folks at Broadcasters General Store. I've been buying equipment from them since, oh my goodness, ever since I started working for Sam Phillips back in Memphis in the early 1990s. Love these folks. They are nice people, and they have sharp pencils. All right, Chris Tarr, we got one quick segment here, maybe about 7 or 8 minutes left. Thinking outside the box. And this is so important for us engineers to be able to do this, not be stuck on a single solution. What did you come across in the last few weeks or months that's made you think outside the box?
Sure. Well, we as my coworker likes to say, we have an embarrassment of riches with our signals. He not too long ago bought, well, it's a couple of years ago now, bought a bunch of unbuilt translators from a deceased gentleman's estate. He had a bunch of licenses that were never built. They were construction permits, and we bought the construction permits, and I had to build all of these sites out. But we build these sites as if they're full power stations. We don't mess around, proper antennas, proper transmitters, that sort of thing. So, as I'm starting to build these out, one of the things is tower siting is where are we going to locate the antennas? And generally, we're doing 2 and 3 bay antennas for these translators. And that can get expensive when all of a sudden, you're having to lease space for all this stuff. So I've developed a system to find good but inexpensive space for some of these sites. So, for example, we had one in licensed to Beloit, Wisconsin. And, there was the typical cell towers and the American Tower stuff. But I kind of widened the search, and there's a great tool for Google Earth made by, it's a plugin by Kevil and Mertz that does the ASR tower list locations, FM and AM.
Yeah.
So what I do is I zoom out of the area that I want to be in. I pull up the ASRs and I start looking around. Okay, what area do I want to be in? And then I start looking at the ASRs, and I'm able. Several times now. Beloit was a great example where I found a site, a tower, 400-foot tower that was owned by a paging company out of Indiana.
Mm-hmm. And these aren't just broadcast towers. These are everybody's towers that are listed on the aviation. Right. Yeah. So it may not be a radio station or a TV station you're thinking of. It could be for something, the county's two-way tower, something else.
Right. So I found this tower. I found out who owned it, and I just cold called them. I said, hey, would you like to? And they're like, oh yeah, we would love to. We only have one person on there, and what would you like to do? And I said, well, I've got this and this. And they said, well, we know that, things are tight. $500. I'm like, yes. So we're at the very top of this tower at 400 some feet in a building with air conditioning, everything else, $500. In another situation, I brought up ASRs, but I also looked for, because, if it's 200 foot or less, it may not have an ASR. I just used Google Earth and searched around. I found a tire shop that had a two-way tower that was close to 150 feet or so. And again, I found out who owned it, and I asked him, hey, I see that you have this tower. Would you be interested in renting space out to us? And it turns out, they had nothing on there anymore. And, I said, really, we don't need much space. It's just a little transmitter and this antenna. And we worked out a deal for $300 a month, and they were happy to do it. This is just found money to them, and they've been great. I get in and out of there whenever I need. They're very helpful. So all it took was, looking at something from a different perspective, okay, where can we put, going to that tire site and going, well, it turns out they have a back room right by the back door where the tower is. If I put this in this corner here, punch a hole through the wall, I'm right at the tower. It was 2 hours to build it out, and you can't do better than the rent we're paying there. So and that goes pretty much with anything, with offices, moving to IP delivery. We did that so that we didn't have to constrain ourselves with locations that had line of sight. So in all of these things, you have to look outside of the way you've always done things in order to come up with these ideas. And again, excuse me, with the tower site situation, we save a ton of money on what we would have spent, going right around here is, $800,000-$900,000 a month sometimes in some places for tower space. We're getting it at a fraction of a price because we're picking space that is, independently owned. And because of that, they don't get a lot of people calling for space, because a lot of these companies now, they just have blanket deals with ATC or Vertical Bridge or something like that. So a lot of these smaller mom and pop tower companies, they don't have anybody on there because nobody calls them to put things on their tower. So when I called this company out of Indiana for our place in Beloit, we pretty much have run of the place, and they're happy to do it because they've got somebody there and keeping an eye on things. So, that's kind of what I mean about thinking outside of the box. Just again, that whole, reducing our office footprint was because we decided that we weren't going to do STLs anymore if we didn't need to. Some of the savings we're getting on tower space, translators, you find those a lot on hospitals and 2A towers and stuff like that. But, these are actually legit towers on some of these sites that I have these on that just aren't being used because they're not owned by big companies. But it does take some footwork. You have to bring up Google Earth and you have to do some research and make some cold calls and do those things. But, my coworker is always amazed that I'm finding these deals for tower sites. It's like, well, it just takes a little more time, and keep your mind open a little bit to go, well, you know what? I wouldn't think to put a translator at a tire store, but it's right where we want to be. And, it's a good site.
I would this is a great story, and thanks for passing those ideas along. And the Google Earth idea, that's great. I would pass along that, you remember Dave Anderson, he's been a guest on the show several times.
Yep.
He found all kinds of great ways to get internet to sites where it had not been possible because they were typically going on bigger towers, but they couldn't get internet because they were so rural. So they would find, like, I don't know, a mom and pop grocery store literally 6 miles away that they could get internet to their either fiber or cable. And they said, hey, we'll pay for your internet if you'll let us put a little tower out back and shoot internet to our tower.
I've done that.
There. Sure. And that would be one way.
Here's another.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here, before I forget, another example of where I kind of got a good score was a site in Baraboo, Wisconsin, where we wanted fiber and we couldn't. We weren't able to service it, but they said, "Well, we'll give you DSL." We got ready to do the DSL, and the installer came and went, "There's fiber all the way to this building, and that's what your DSL rides on." So I'm like, I'm keeping my mouth shut. I'm getting, they don't even have a DSL modem there. It's fiber right into my device, but I'm paying DSL rates for fiber service. So, sometimes that happens and you're just like, the guy's like, I don't know how they let you get away with this, but that's great.
If you're in the last piece of advice I might, if you're in rural areas, plenty of farms, still have towers for two-way to the tractors, or in Mississippi, two-way to the aerial spraying aircraft. So we've had a number of STL hop points done on farm towers. So that's another resource too, where you may or may not find something on the ASR.
Another good one is make friends with your local wireless internet provider, either with space on your towers. Yeah. I have a couple of sites where, for a while, I have one site where that's my STL at this point. And if you're good friends with them, they will go out of their way to shape their traffic and prioritize your packets and everything to give you a really reliable connection. So that's another one is don't forget them, because a lot of times they'll need tower space. And so, we have a really good mutually beneficial agreement.
I told my wireless provider, he said he's seen my traffic and it was very shapely. So. And on that really bad dad joke,
kind of traffic,
we're gonna cut it off. Chris, thank you so much. We're talking about EAS for us and bringing us to our senses there. Fiber installs, great ideas, and thinking outside the box when it comes to finding tower space. So we really appreciate it. Some of you may have heard that Tom Ray was going to be our guest today. Tom got caught up and wasn't able to join us. He was at a tower site that did not have good internet access. So that's why he'll be on in 2 weeks, though. Next week, we'll be at Madison, Wisconsin. Chris and I will figure out a time to do the show there, and we'll bring you a great show from the one of the best shows anywhere for engineers, the Broadcasters Clinic. And also coming up, Marcus O'Rourke will be with us on a future show. Tim Barry, the guy who does lots of sports remotes for the University of Tennessee. Tim's good, and he was voted like an engineer of the year here in Tennessee, something like that. Tim's a great guy. He's going to be with us too. Chris, thanks very much for being with us. I appreciate you. And we're going to, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you. Thanks to Suncast for producing today's show. I really appreciate you, Suncast. Right on the ball, on the money too. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.